The doors of Boston Luxury Motors slid open with a soft hiss. Sunlight spilled across the polished marble floor, glinting off the glass walls and casting reflections on the showroom's exotic lineup. Bentleys, Ferraris, Aston Martins, machines that whispered indulgence and screamed status. But the woman who stepped in didn't match the picture. Brown ponytail, simple white t-shirt, faded jeans, sneakers that had seen better days. She didn't turn heads, not at first. Her name was Margaret Collins, Maggie to those who knew her, and to the world, a nobody. At least that's what the salesman thought. Blake Thompson, the sales manager, spotted her instantly. A smirk curled on his lips. Another window shopper, he thought. Another dreamer, wasting time. He straightened his tie and made a beeline to intercept her. But before he could, a younger salesman, Daniel, got there first. "Good morning, ma'am," Daniel said, with a nervous smile. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. Anything you'd like to see?" Maggie smiled back, eyes already drawn to the elevated platform across the room. "That one," she said, pointing at the sleek midnight blue coupe shimmering under the lights. The azure coupe. Blake slid in smoothly, cutting off Daniel like a magician, intercepting applause. "I'll handle this," he said, with a too-slick grin. "Looking for directions, ma'am?" Maggie blinked, confused. "Actually, no. I'm interested in the azure." Blake's grin faltered just a hair. He looked her up and down, sneakers, plain shirt, zero labels. A visual scan that lasted only a second, but said everything. "That model's extremely exclusive," he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Only 15 made this year. You might want to try our used car division. It's about 3 blocks east." Maggie stayed calm, polite. "I'd still like to know more about this one. If possible." "It's appointment only," he replied, lying without hesitation. "For serious clients." Then, almost on cue, a couple dressed in designer chic swept into the showroom. Blake didn't excuse himself. He simply turned away. "Daniel can get you a brochure," he tossed over his shoulder before striding toward the newcomers. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you again." Maggie stood there for a moment, absorbing it all. The dismissal, the assumption, the insult. Daniel returned, hesitant and clearly embarrassed. "I'm really sorry about that," he said quietly. "Would you still like to hear about the azure?" "Yes," she replied, smiling warmly. "I would." As Daniel began his explanation, Maggie watched Blake guide the Harringtons straight to the very same car he'd said was by appointment only. She watched him open the door, watched Mrs. Harrington run her hand along the leather interior, and she said nothing until she approached, calmly, and said, "Excuse me, I was hoping to inquire again about purchasing this model." Blake didn't even try to hide his irritation. "As I mentioned," he said, voice tight, "this car is being shown to serious customers. Perhaps try our pre-owned section, or come back another time." Maggie held her gaze. "It's a birthday gift for my sister. Next month." Blake stepped closer, lowered his voice. "Listen, lady, I get it. Dreams are nice, but this car costs more than a house, and I've got real buyers to deal with." Maggie said only this: "I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today." That was when Blake laughed, loud, sharp, echoing across the showroom. "A cash purchase? What is this? A garage sale? You think you can walk in here dressed like that and drop $250,000? The showroom went still. Customers turned. Staff paused. Maggie's cheeks flushed, not from shame, but from the steady, slow heat of rising fury. Not for herself, but for anyone who had ever been dismissed, judged, or talked down to like this. "I believe my money is as good as anyone else's, she said quietly. Blake stepped forward, looming now. Let me make it simple. Come back, with proof of funds, and dressed appropriately. Or leave. The silence was thick. Then a voice cut through it. Is there a problem here? It came from a man in a tailored suit, approaching with measured steps. The owner, Richard Mason. Blake straightened up fast. No problem at all, sir. Just explaining our policy. Richard looked Maggie over, then said smoothly, Miss Collins, she replied. Margaret Collins. Richard gave a thin smile. Ah, Miss Collins. Well, our clientele usually understand the exclusivity of what we offer. I understand perfectly, she said. Your manager made it quite clear. Blake jumped in again. If you're really interested, call for an appointment, but bring proof next time. These cars aren't for just anyone. A snicker came from someone nearby. Maggie turned, looked at the faces watching, the judgment, the smugness, and said nothing. She walked out, past the glass doors, into the sun, and pulled out her phone. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She smiled, just a little, and dialed, because Maggie Collins wasn't just anyone. And tomorrow, they'd find that out. The Collins estate sat quietly on 5 acres just outside Boston. No towering gates, no gold-plated name signs, just understated elegance, and the kind of silence money could buy. Inside the home office, Alexander Collins looked up from his desk the moment Maggie stepped in. He didn't need her to speak. 15 years of marriage had taught him everything he needed to know from her eyes. Something had happened. He stood. What is it? Maggie sat down slowly, the weight of the day catching up to her all at once. It was educational, she said, with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She told him everything, the looks, the tone, the public dismissal. Alexander didn't interrupt. He listened, and his expression darkened with each word. Not with rage, with focus. The kind of focus that could reshape entire industries and ruin reputations. When she finished, he said nothing at first, just silence, stretching between them like a loaded pause. Then softly, So, what would you like to do about it? Maggie looked down at her hands. Part of me wants to do nothing. Just buy the car somewhere else and move on. A beat. But then I think about Daniel, that young salesman who treated me with respect when no one else did. And I think about everyone else who walks into places like that and gets treated like they don't belong. She looked up, her eyes sharp now. They need to understand that worth isn't worn on your wrist or stitched into your suit. Alexander nodded slowly, a plan already forming. I think, he said carefully, we can show them that, without theatrics. No buying the dealership and firing everyone. Maggie smirked. That did cross my mind, he chuckled. Too cliché. But, he leaned forward, voice low, eyes twinkling. Maybe just a little education is in order. That night they worked quietly, Maggie on the couch, Alexander at his laptop. Phone calls were made, names were pulled, emails sent, connections activated. No revenge, no shouting, just precision. By midnight, everything was in place. Are you sure you don't want to come along tomorrow? Alexander asked as they shut everything down. Maggie shook her head. This isn't about me needing to watch them squirm. It's about them learning why they should have looked twice before judging once. She smiled, this time for real. But I do expect a full report. Alexander grinned. You'll have it. With details, the next morning, the sky over Boston Luxury Motors was crystal clear. Birds chirped, tires gleamed, coffee steamed in paper cups. Inside the showroom, Blake Thompson stood front and center, fresh suit pressed, tie tightened. His voice echoed from the morning meeting. Qualify customers properly, he reminded his team. We cater to a specific clientele. That's not elitism, it's efficiency. Daniel, the junior salesman, kept his head down, still rattled from yesterday, still remembering Maggie's quiet dignity and Blake's loud disrespect. And then, at precisely 10:17 a.m., a sound. Low, powerful, impossible to ignore. Every head turned. Outside, a car glided to a stop in front of the main entrance. Not just any car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, extended wheelbase, custom paint that shifted color in the sunlight. Midnight blue, fading into deep sapphire. The kind of vehicle you don't just buy, you commission. Blake's heart skipped. Even he had to admit, this was beyond elite. Is that? Richard Mason, the dealership owner, had stepped out from his office, drawn by the silence. The Phantom, Blake said, already moving toward the doors. Custom configuration, ultra rare. A chauffeur stepped out, white gloves and all, and opened the rear door. Out stepped a man. Tall, impeccably tailored, quiet power radiating from every movement. His salt and pepper hair combed back. Shoes like mirrors. A suit so understated it whispered wealth. Blake's instincts went into overdrive. He intercepted the man before anyone else could. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors," he said, voice full of energy. Blake Thompson, sales manager, an absolute pleasure. The man offered a handshake, firm but cold. "Alexander Collins," he said simply. Blake's brain clicked. The name, familiar, but he couldn't place it. Didn't matter. The man screamed money. And that Phantom, it screamed more. "What brings you in today, Mr. Collins?" Blake asked, trying not to sound too eager. "We just received some limited editions." Alexander raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm here for a specific vehicle. The Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake lit up. "Ah, excellent choice, sir. Only 15 produced this year. Let me personally show you." "I know where it is," Alexander said, voice smooth. "My wife was here yesterday. She expressed interest." Blake froze. "Your wife?" he said, uncertain. "I don't recall. Perhaps a colleague?" Alexander's tone dropped. "No, Mr. Thompson. You assisted her. Or rather, you refused to." Blake's blood drained. Behind him, Daniel gasped. "Margaret Collins, white t-shirt, jeans. You told her to check out used cars." The room stopped breathing. Mr. Collins, You laughed at her," Alexander continued, voice flat. "You embarrassed her, publicly." By now, Richard Mason had joined them. "Is there an issue here?" he asked carefully. Alexander turned. "You must be Mr. Mason." "Yes. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors." "Thank you," Alexander interrupted. "I was just explaining how your manager handled my wife's visit yesterday." He paused. Let the silence stretch. "She was interested in purchasing the Azure Coupe as a gift, but was dismissed based solely on her appearance." Mason paled. I do recall there was a situation, but I wasn't aware of all the details," Alexander said, cool and steady. "Include your sales manager telling her she didn't belong here." A small crowd had begun to form, and Blake, he was learning just how long a minute can feel when it's spent in silence, in front of everyone, with your entire career hanging by a thread. Blake Thompson stood frozen. The name Collins now echoed in his head like a warning bell, finally heard too late. Mr. Collins, if there was any misunderstanding—" "There wasn't," a quiet voice interrupted. It came from Daniel. All eyes turned to the young salesman, standing awkwardly behind the Phantom. He looked surprised at his own courage, but didn't back down. Miss Collins was polite, Daniel said. She was clear about what she wanted, and she was dismissed, not because she wasn't serious, but because of how she looked. A sharp, slow silence followed. Alexander turned back to Mason. "You know," he said calmly, "my wife founded the Collins Foundation. It's provided over $50 million in medical support and education for children with disabilities." He paused. "She lives simply, by choice, because it keeps her connected to the people she helps. It's one of the many reasons I admire her." Mason's face had gone pale. "Mr. Collins, please believe me. This is not who we are." Alexander tilted his head. "Isn't it?" He turned slightly toward the Azure coupe. "I wasn't planning to buy just this car," he said. "I was also looking to replace our company fleet, 7 vehicles, and possibly update my personal collection." Blake perked up slightly, hope flickering back into his eyes. "But," Alexander continued, "after what I've seen, I'm questioning whether this is the right dealership to invest in." The silence cracked like glass. "Mr. Collins," Mason pleaded, "please allow us to make this right." Alexander paused, considered. "Perhaps there is a way forward," he said. "But it requires more than just an apology." Mason leaned in. "Anything." "The Collins Foundation," Alexander began, "is hosting a benefit gala next month, raising funds for a new adaptive sports complex. We need volunteers." He turned his gaze directly on Blake. "I think your presence would be educational." Blake swallowed hard. "As a guest?" "No," Alexander said. "As a volunteer, event setup, crowd assistance, helping the children." The implication was clear. You judged others. Now you serve them. "And," Alexander added, turning back to Mason, "your staff could benefit from unconscious bias training. I know a few excellent consultants." "Perhaps there is a way forward," he said, "but it requires more than just an apology." Mason leaned in. "Anything." "The Collins Foundation," Alexander began, "is hosting a benefit gala next month, raising funds for a new adaptive sports complex. We need volunteers." He turned his gaze directly on Blake. "I think your presence would be educational." Blake swallowed hard. "As a guest?" "No," Alexander said. "As a volunteer, event setup, crowd assistance, helping the children." The implication was clear. You judged others. Now you serve them. "And," Alexander added, turning back to Mason, "your staff could benefit from unconscious bias training. I know a few excellent consultants." "Absolutely," Mason nodded. "We'd welcome that. And as for the Azure," Alexander turned to Daniel, "I'd like you to handle the purchase, from start to finish." Daniel blinked. "Me, sir? Thank you. I'd be honored." "Good," Alexander said simply. "Let's begin." He paused beside the car, running his fingers along the smooth midnight blue surface. "My wife," he said with a smile, "has excellent taste." 1 month later, the grand ballroom of the Boston Hotel glittered beneath chandeliers. Laughter echoed, music played. Children in wheelchairs mingled with donors, athletes, and families. Hope hung in the air like perfume. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson, no longer in his tailored suit, adjusted his volunteer badge and gently guided a young boy in a wheelchair toward the stage. The past month had changed him. He'd shown up to volunteer out of obligation. He stayed out of something else, something unexpected. Across the room, Maggie Collins, elegant, understated in a deep blue dress, approached him. "How are you finding it?" she asked. Blake thought for a moment. "Humbling," he said, "and necessary." Maggie nodded. "Thomas seems to like you." Blake smiled, glancing at the boy nearby. He's been teaching me adaptive basketball. Apparently, I'm terrible. Maggie laughed. He's an honest coach. Then Blake turned serious. Mrs. Collins, I know I've apologized, but I need to say it again. To you. Directly. I was wrong. There's no excuse. She looked at him for a long moment. You're right, she said gently. There isn't. A pause. No malice in her tone. The real question is what you've learned. Blake took a breath. That respect shouldn't be conditional. That worth isn't measured in appearance, position, or price tags. And that everyone deserves dignity until they prove they don't. Not the other way around. Good lessons, she said. Expensive ones too, I imagine. Blake gave a rueful chuckle. Worth every penny. Across the room, Alexander joined them, placing a hand on Maggie's shoulder. Blake was just telling me what he's been up to, Maggie said. Alexander nodded. I heard you've been mentoring Daniel, and that you've signed on to continue volunteering. Blake nodded. Yes, sir. And working with Mr. Mason to overhaul our customer approach. No more qualifying people based on how they look. Alexander smiled faintly. Which reminds me, that corporate fleet I mentioned. Blake looked up. Yes? We're still in the market. Daniel speaks highly of you. I'd like you to handle the transaction. Blake blinked, stunned. I'd be honored, Mr. Collins. Truly. Later that night, as the gala wound down, Blake watched Maggie and Alexander talking with guests, not as icons or elites, but as people, present, real, human. He thought back to that day in the showroom, to the mistake, to the moment everything shifted, and he knew he would never see people the same way again. As he helped Thomas back into his wheelchair, the boy looked up and grinned. You know what, Mr. Blake? You're pretty cool. For a grown-up. Blake smiled, genuinely. Coming from you, Thomas, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. We all make judgments, don't we? But sometimes, looking past appearances reveals the most extraordinary people of all. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Ever been misjudged or judged someone too soon?